Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BamaOnLine Crimson Tide Headline Show. I'm BamaOnLine publisher Tim Watson. With me is Andrew Bone, who's our editor, does a lot of stuff with team and recruiting, so you get a little bit of both. We got a lot to pack in this show. We got thoughts on the FSU game. We're going to discuss the weekend that was in college football. We're going to discuss the weekend that's coming up, which does not look nearly as attractive. Of course, we're going to talk recruiting. Alabama's got visitors come in. That's some good news. They know how to host a party. So a lot going on. We're going to get into that. We appreciate your time and for you being here with us. If you get a chance, give us a like and subscribe so you can get this content every week. We have a show coming every Tuesday. Charlie Potter and Blake Byler have a show coming every Thursday, and we pop in with breaking news and other stuff. Andrew Bone, get us into some thoughts here.
Well, obviously, negative thoughts about the game. There's not really any positives. After that loss to Florida State on the road, I think going into the game, everybody kind of expected Alabama to go down there and just have a great performance, and they didn't. Talking to different people throughout the last month, and it's always kind of funny to me because everyone thinks that they were misled about the team, that this wasn't as good of a team as everybody thought. There was a lot of people who went out there and saw practices, not a media viewing period. There was a lot of people who went out and watched the entire practices, and they went out and watched the entire scrimmages, and they'd been around the program for a very long time, and they were really impressed with what they saw on the field. Most physical practices they had seen in years. A lot of talent on both sides of the ball. One guy in particular, Corey Reamer, who obviously played on the 2009 national championship team. He said, there's this narrative about Kalen DeBoer that's just not true. He's at practice every single day, just tearing these guys apart. He said, it was really impressive to see because all you see on the sideline is he's not that guy that's getting in players' faces and getting fired up, but you see that every single day at practice. So I think, the biggest thing was everybody was just dumbfounded and surprised by the lack of effort, the lack of physicality. We heard that yesterday from the coaching staff that they were surprised by it. And hopefully that's going to be addressed, because if it's not addressed, if players don't pick things up and if coaches don't change things, it's going to be a very long season for Alabama.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we knew there was an unknown factor with Florida State. And I was impressed with how well their offensive line gelled together. I was impressed with their defensive line. I did a little bit of research after the fact, and Nebraska's defensive coordinator is a guy for bringing exotic, quick looks at getting at the quarterback and bringing the heat. We saw that as against a first-time starter. I mean, really no excuses to look that way. I think the coaches said it. It's not going to be enough for the fans, and I understand how upset they are. We've been dealing with it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday on the roundtable, the BOL message board. Very active, very, very opinionated. And I agree, there's no excuses. And we don't have excuses today. There's no excuses. You got to give effort. You got to play harder. You got to fix what's broke. You got to do it. You got to do it this week. And I know it's Louisiana Monroe. And if they win 101-0, it won't be enough. But a step in the right direction, cleaning up a lot of things, to me is pretty important, Andrew, to take those small steps to get to the big steps.
Yeah, Coach Saban mentioned it on the set on ESPN last night. Talked about the improvement that you're going to make from week 1 to week 2. You recognize a lot of the things that you did wrong in week 1, and it doesn't matter if you're playing Louisiana Monroe, if you're playing Ohio State in week 2. You know what you messed up on. You're going to try to fix it. You're going to try to get better. More repetition against live competition. Always a good thing. As you mentioned, Ty Simpson going on the road, first start, playing from behind pretty quickly in a tough road environment. No excuse, but I think I was pretty hard on the coaching staff, and I think that was probably justified. But from watching the film, going back and watching replay, I was disappointed in lack of effort by some of those players that were out on the field. They've got to give better effort. They got to be more physical. They got to be more aggressive. They got to play quicker. And we didn't see that against Florida State on Saturday. And I think a lot of those guys can be better. We've seen them be a lot better on the field. They just got to pick it up, and if they can't, then Alabama can lose 5 or 6 games this season. But if they can pick it up, maybe they can, be 4-1 going or 3-1 going into October, and maybe they can win at Georgia. Nobody's going to expect that. Nobody expects they're going to be able to go into Athens after what they saw on Saturday. But the team's got to get better somehow. They got to get better quickly. Good to be able to play teams like Louisiana, and I'm not trying to discredit these guys, but Louisiana Monroe playing against Wisconsin, they're not these top level elite teams that are going to challenge for a national championship. So you got to go out there and play well, get better, and see if you can find some good rhythm before that trip to Athens.
Tell you what, they better treat every game like it's the Super Bowl, like it's the national championship game. They're going to, the fan base pretty upset. I understand, proud fan base. You and I have been around a long time. I mean, you said you went through the Shula era. We lost a coach while I was driving to an AAU tournament. Lost a head coach in Mike Price. So we've seen a lot of stuff. I will say the week one, people call it overreacting, but it's all you've got to go off, right? Week one. We saw Arch Manning struggle. My goodness, they won't start to pull his scholarship in some cases. So playing a pretty elite defensive scheme over there in Ohio State. But we're going to see that. We're going to see. All you can do is get better week to week. Alabama has that chance. Outside of really Jeremy Bernard, and there's probably some other guys, but I thought Jeremy was everybody. And I think they alluded to this. Play like Jeremy, guys. That's literally what you're supposed to do. Effort, everything you do. Come back, and do the best you can. College football as a whole is kind of wild, Andrew. I mean, we had LSU beat Clemson. I'm not sure a lot of people picked that. We had Texas.
Yeah, Lee Corso did.
Lee Corso 6 for 6. Talking about going out like a G. He came in and picked 6 games, won all 6, I believe. And, what a tribute and what a way to go out for Lee Corso. I know at times we've kind of messed with Lee Corso when we were mad at him, but obviously a guy that went out well. But again, not many people picked. He picked FSU as well, by the way. So you got Clemson losing to LSU, and Clemson did not look very good. And you got Texas and Ohio State, and I think Ohio State played a factor in that Texas game. But I'll tell you who looked pretty good to me was Miami. I thought they looked physical, big, fired up, the emotions. Michael Irvin might have had a heart attack. He was very much into that game. But we saw a lot of football this week and a little bit to tell us the future, what that top 10 is going to look like.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting today. But then, as you mentioned, it's overreaction Monday. There's going to be teams that looked really good over the weekend that aren't going to be great later in the season. There's teams that look really bad that can be better later in the season. I'm not saying Alabama, but I'm saying there's a lot of schools that are hoping to improve, that are going to get better as the season progresses. We've mentioned it several times on the roundtable. It's been mentioned by fans. It's been mentioned on social media. Notre Dame made a national championship run last season, played Ohio State in the national championship. Week 2, they lost at home to Northern Illinois. Now their path was a little bit easier than playing in the SEC or playing a lot of great competition every single week. But teams figure it out at some point, and they can make a run. So I'm intrigued to kind of see what that top 25 looks like, kind of where Alabama sits in it, if they're if they're in it at all. I would think it would be a major overreaction if they did fall out of the top 25, but I guess we shall see.
I'm just as curious to see if FSU's in the top 25. So I don't think you can go from 8 out of the top 25 and then have FSU go from unranked to in the top 25. And I think, but going back to FSU, I don't think losing's the biggest thing. I think a lot of what we saw is the biggest problem. The lack of effort concerning how Deontay Lawson was moving. 9 months after ACL injuries, a trooper just to be out there. But I do think, we had a post on the roundtable where I think you want to have not necessarily a youth movement, but you really need to hammer down in this game to try to get other guys playing time. I'd like to see Michael Carroll, Keelan Russell, Ivan Taylor, Luke Metz, Abdul Sanders. I'd like to see some guys like that. And, of course, we're recruiting guys first. So if it's being you, we'd start all the true freshmen. We want to see them in action. Coaches aren't going to do that.
Speaking of the true freshmen, you get on social media and everybody gets all upset when things aren't going well, and you see all these things. Coaches on the hot seat, fire this coach, fire that coach. Recruiting's still an important thing, and people say, well, high school recruiting doesn't matter. You got to go into the portal. Well, you also don't want to lose your future star players to the portal. I mean, you look at what Alabama was able to sign, last year, Coach DeBoer's first year, guys like Keelan Russell, Michael Carroll, Jackson Lloyd. I mean, just a lot of really good players. And if you go out and beg for that coaching staff to get fired, if you want Kalen DeBoer on the hot seat, if you want to revamp the staff completely, you're going to lose a lot of your star players, and you're going to have to start all over again. Everybody, there's a lot of people who might say, well, we don't have any star players anymore. Look what they did against Florida State. There's a lot of star players on the team still. A lot of big impact. So I don't understand that. You got to go through the season, see kind of what happens the rest of the way, adjust, fix things. It's not last season. Last season was whatever. They lost at home or they lost at Florida State. What can they do from here on out? Quit trying to fire everybody. Just fix the damn problem and see what happens. If they can't fix the problem,
that's going to work itself out. You're not the Alabama fans, which we love you, and all fan bases are pretty much the same. There's been a revisionist of history. We were in discussions yesterday that no first-time starter has ever struggled in a football game at Alabama. They brought up Jalen Hurts at USC. He literally had an interception and a pick. He was 6 of 11, threw for 100-something yards. Nothing against Jalen, but there is a learning curve in that. And I know there was things Ty can do better. I think staff talk about that. But at the end of the day, recruiting is important, because if you do have a coaching change, what's on that roster is going to be a big selling point for that new coach. Come in, try to keep them. We know the portal's there, but that's still, you want to have good players. I don't care anything else. Andrew, last week was gold. Even last night, we had Bill Belichick's NFL debut. We had Notre Dame on Sunday. This week's terrible. Texas, San Jose State, Penn State, Florida International. Just a bad games. We got a pretty good one. Iowa State should be a good rivalry game. We've got one more big one. Michigan and Oklahoma, very interesting for that. 2 first-time quarterbacks, both of them have a game under their belt. But overall, what a depressing South Carolina State, Miami, Cookman. One interesting, though, is Florida and South Florida, I just realized was playing. Golish put you in the headlock, won't he? That South Florida coach.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback, what's his name, Byram. I don't know if that's his first or last name, but he was outstanding the other day. I think that who was it? They played Boise State. He's a guy that's very dangerous. I mean, he gave Alabama fits. Last couple of years. So, intrigued to see that game. Oklahoma, as you mentioned, against Michigan, Bryce Underwood going against John Mateer, the Oklahoma quarterback. That's going to be a fun game to watch for sure. But week 2, I mean, it's always pretty much crap. I mean, week 1 is certainly it used to be week 1. Week 1, everybody plays their their FCS opponents, and it's just not a lot of excitement. But now it's week 1, a lot of big games. Week 2, just crappy games. You kind of wish that Alabama would have played their crap game. That's hard to say. Not their crap game. Their lower tier game in week 1 and gone to Florida State in week 2. So you kind of break things in a little bit more before you get down to Florida State. But that's the way things worked out this year. And obviously other teams went on the road and won big games like LSU did at Clemson. Texas didn't at Ohio State, but there were a lot of teams went out there and played really good competition this past week.
Before we get into recruiting, I want to remind you guys to download the Game Time app. You can create an account. You use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. That is code ON3 for $20 off. Now, Game Time app, looking for tickets. I've never used them yet. We just started this promotion, but do plan to use them for a later game in October with Alabama. But things easy. You pop on the app, gives you the fans the advantage. It's the fastest, easy way to grab tickets. And the one thing I love the most is that everything's up front with the price. I mean, I know we've all dealt with tickets $100 and out the door it's $189. But again, download the Game Time app if you're looking for tickets for anything. Create an account, use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, that's code ON3 for $20 off. Andrew Bone, our specialty. We're going to talk recruiting. This list, I pulled up your GOAT list here. It's pretty sexy on a Tuesday for Louisiana Monroe. There's a lot of Alabama players committed. A lot of the top guys coming in. Got some 5 stars. Cedarian Morgan's coming in. And boy, I watched this game Saturday, and he was stalk blocking his tail off. They played a good game, won against a good team, but didn't get a lot of touches, didn't get a lot of chances, but won a pretty big game. Let's talk about a new offer, though. Let's talk about Corey Howard, committed to Georgia from Valdosta, kind of defensive lineman. Everybody loves the defensive lineman. They've had a good class so far. But tell us a little bit. Alabama offered him. He's planning to come in for this game. I watched his film. He's much heavier than he was as a junior. Looks much bigger. Really good explosive athlete off the edge.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting last week when we talked about this a month or so ago that Alabama was going to be watching and evaluating guys heading into the season. Probably we're going to see some new offers. I didn't expect we were going to see some offers basically the first or second weekend of the season. Thought we'd see that a little bit later, but saw 2 offers in the 26th class last week. Kamari Bing out of St. Francis and Baltimore teammate with Jaira Edwards. Doesn't have a visit date set up yet, but we expect him to make a trip down. But as far as Corey Howard, I mean, this is an intriguing prospect who's 6'6", 265 pounds. Really long, tall guy, but Alabama extended him an offer. He is going to make, I think it was last Thursday when he got that offer. He's going to make the trip down to Tuscaloosa this weekend. It's going to be his first time visiting Alabama. Looking at Georgia's recruiting class right now, obviously another top class, but he's one of 7 defensive line commitments for Georgia. I mean, that's a really big defensive line class, and I think that if he was one of 3 or 4 guys, it might be pretty tough. But and I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any means, but you might have a realistic chance to go in there and pull him away, knowing that you have so many guys, so many other guys at your position in that class. So, Alabama's going to have to really sell him this weekend because there's obviously a lot of negative blowback from the Florida State game. Different coaching staffs are certainly, using that against them. I'm sure they've, certainly talked about Alabama's defensive line, but, Alabama has to get another defensive lineman in this class. They currently have, I think, 3 or 4, depending on how you look at it. I guess you could say 4 defensive linemen. They would like to get 5, maybe even 6 defensive linemen in this class. This was a big year for D linemen. So this is the guy they've offered. They're going to see what kind of happens. This is going to be an unofficial visit. So if things go well for both sides, I mean, you got to remember, this is a kid that's going to be coming in that's got an offer, but Alabama's got to meet with him and decide, are they going to move forward? Are they going to invite him back for an official visit? Is this potentially a good fit, not only from what they see on the field, but off the field as well?
Yeah, Blake Byler, our youngster on BamaOnLine.com, had a good interview with him yesterday. Said he's never been to Tuscaloosa. The one thing we do, this coaching staff is that this coaching staff knows how to host a visitor, give him that time. So I expect he'll have a good time if he makes it in. Also, you guys can check us out on BamaOnLine.com. For you that aren't familiar with the website, you get $1 for the first week. You can check us out. The Bama Online Roundtable, the message board, is the place to be. It is extremely active. Andrew Bone can attest to that. We've been locked onto it for the last 3 days. Really, in football season, we're locked on it. I mean, year-round, we're on it. But football season, we're locked in because there's always something to discuss, win, lose, or draw. Again, that's BamaOnline.com for $1. And if you get a chance, Andrew, give us that thumb. We haven't seen that thumb in weeks. Give us a like and a subscription. Subscribe so you get these weekly updates. If you like the content, we'd love to have you, and we do appreciate your time. Andrew, you talked about Kamari Bean. Pretty interesting guy. Saw him in the first game, very active. You saw Jaira Edwards was already recruiting him on Twitter. I'm sure he's in his ear. Committed to Maryland. When I looked at this guy, his film jumps out it jumps out right away. But we're talking about Penn State, Tennessee, Michigan, Miami, Florida, Auburn offers. So this is a guy that chose Maryland, probably staying close to home. And, Mike Loxley does well in recruiting, works really hard, especially in that DMV. But this is a guy that athletically kind of fits what they look for in a safety. And, we, like you said, they're evaluating these seniors. Goodness knows what's coming this week.
Yeah, it's a kid at 6'1", 192 pounds. Had a pick six in his season opener, which was on ESPN. Really close friends with Jaira Edwards. Like I said, he hasn't set up a visit to Tuscaloosa yet, but says he's planning on getting down there for an official. He's got Jaira has 2 visit dates coming up next month. Vanderbilt and Tennessee. To Alabama, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of those weekends we see his teammate make it down with him. But yeah, I mean, 6'1", 192 pounds, can run, and just kind of see how things shake out. He committed to Maryland over a year ago, so he's been really solid with them. Didn't take any other official visits during the summer. Had scheduled some other trips, but ended up canceling those visits, kind of locking in with Maryland. But now that Alabama's offered, said that he has to go down there and check things out himself. So kind of see where things go after that visit. He told me, he said, Jair's already told me that the moment I get down there, I'm going to go ahead and commit. So we'll see how that visit goes. So Jaira's already recruiting him for Alabama, and obviously Mo Lindquist and that coaching staff, Jason Jones, are have continued to evaluate guys leading into the season.
Yeah, it's been busy too. I know him and Coach Cap are going to look for that offensive line pretty hard. Bama has 21 commitments, ranked 7th in the country, has 4 5-star commitments, a good class to date. Again, the difference between number 7 and number 2 is a 5-star like Tank Jones. That's how thin these lines are for these classes. By the way, Bama did not. Nolan Wilson, the big commitment for Mississippi. There was a lot of hubbub because he planned to visit for the Notre Dame Miami game. Andrew Boney did not go. Had practice on Monday, didn't go. I just think that was a long ride for him. So that's a little bit of a bullet dodge. But you saw the reaction when it was reported he goes. He was planning to go. You and I said they might go. Everything's next. Recruits are often like old men, like me and you. Like, hey, 3 weeks from now, sure, I'd like to drive to the beach. And then it's Thursday, and you're like, hell no, I got stuff to do. I'm tired. I'm tired after a game. I want to see my girlfriend. I want to hang out with my friends. So those schedules change. And also we see them pop up randomly out of the blue at the last minute. But this visitor weekend, Andrew Bone, speaking of commitments, Ced Morgan, Xavier Griffin, Jamari Matthews, Xavier Kroll, who we're going to talk about in a minute, Max Sutter, Nolan Wilson, Zion Gibson, Jeff Kamala, Kamari Johnson, Chris Booker, Bear Fretwell, Zay Hall, Owen Cabell, the Sabb brothers, one's a 5-star, Chicken Gabor, Jack Brown, Carter Jones, Bryson Brown, and Trace Washington. That's a really good list, right? I didn't expect to list so many. I was going to stop after 3 or 4, but the 6th or 7th one is Nolan Wilson and Zion Gibson. But getting Ced Morgan on campus, I think, is big. He's been a big advocate for Alabama. Andrew, I think getting Xavier Griffin's mom's on campus is huge. I'm hoping she comes more than Xavier, right?
You should be down there, just as much as Xavier. I will interrupt this real quick. The top 25 did just drop, and the team that Alabama lost to this weekend has moved into the top 10. Florida State's now number 8, so Alabama lost to the number 8 team in the country on the road. And Alabama, for Alabama fans, probably won't like this, but they have fallen out.
That's such a weird flip. That's just to swap them out. But you know what? I don't think – the rankings matter nada. Matters nothing. You know what? I wouldn't rank them. If I was a neutral guy just watching, I don't know if I'd have Florida State at 8, though.
That's a big jump. Hey, yeah, I thought –
I find it conflicting is what I find it.
Well, I thought if Florida State moved into the top 25 after that win against Alabama, into the top 20, top 15. Yeah, Alabama could fall out, but now they are in the top 10. It sort of surprised me that Alabama fell out of the top 25, but you look at the top 25 and pretty much everybody, except for teams like, Ohio State, Texas, Texas, Clemson, those are teams that lost big top 5 games, on the road. I guess Clemson won at home, but you're not surprised to see those teams still, ranked very high, and all the other schools that are in there are teams that won this week and 1-0. So Alabama 0-1. They can't be 0. They can't lose. They can't lose for a while. They didn't win some more games.
The thing to me that's conflicting is how do you have a loss to the number 8 team and then drop that far? I did expect Bama to drop, but I thought it was going to be in the 21-23 range, and I thought Florida State would be in the 15 range. You go from the underdog. If I'm a Florida State fan, I'm not extremely happy. You go from the underdog, nobody's looking at us, to now, now you're everybody's Super Bowl. Anyways,
the funny thing now is, nobody's talking about the top. Nobody's talking about the teams that are in the top 25 now. Everybody's going to only talk about Alabama being outside the top 25.
Good. I mean, that's there. You want to be humbled. You want to earn it. Go earn it. Starts this week. You got Wisconsin next. You win the next 2 games in convincing fashion. You sneak in the top 25 somewhere probably, and then you go to Athens. And, they're going to want Alabama, Georgia, both of them to have a number by their name, right?
Oh, yeah.
17th ranked Alabama against number 3 Georgia. They don't want to go in unranked. That would be no fun. Before we get out of here, let's discuss a little bit more. Xavier Griffin's mom. Let's talk about her because I think she's as 10 toes down, diehard as Justin Hill's mom. Huge recruiter. You see her on social media. So getting Xavier and plus mom coming in. Andrew, overall, big visitor list.
Yeah, it's a big for Louisiana Monroe. I think the good thing about Louisiana Monroe game is it is a 6:45 kickoff rather than a 2 p.m. kickoff or an 11 a.m. So you get a lot of guys that normally wouldn't come to to a game like this back on campus, and probably, in my opinion, very critical for a lot of these guys to be back in Tuscaloosa this weekend, a weekend after a loss, a weekend after a lot of negative things. Talked about the program, talked about the coaching staff. You got to get these guys back on campus, kind of see where their head's at. Make them believe that things are going to improve, and they've got to see it. But getting them around, players, getting them around other commitments in the class is going to be huge. Getting a guy like Jet Tamala and Max Sutter, guys that are outside the region, back into Tuscaloosa, to kind of see where things are. But it's obviously the top 100 5-star guys, like an Xavier Griffin, Jamarian Matthews, guys that are very, consider themselves very solid with their commitments. But you also have guys, and Xavier Crowell as well. But you also have a few guys who are taking visits elsewhere this fall. Nolan Wilson didn't make it to Miami this past weekend, but he is intending to take a trip down to Miami. There's going to be
allegedly. There's a difference between Miami expecting him and him expecting. He could have went this week.
Well, he's saying that he will. So we will just go by. Maybe it cancels. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gets to Tuscaloosa this weekend, has a conversation with Alabama, and says, I'm done. Thank you, everybody else. But Darian Morgan told me the other day that he's planning on taking a few game day visits, but also says that he's 100% that Alabama's where he wants to be. Just wants to go and experience some different things. We saw that with Ryan Williams during his senior year, going to Athens, going to Auburn, multiple times, including when Alabama was playing at home against Tennessee. You don't see that too often, but Ryan kept telling everybody, I am 100% solid. Nothing is going to change. Of course, it did change when Saban retired, but, came back a couple weeks later. So good to get a lot of these guys back on campus this weekend, and we'll kind of see how, what their reaction is and how they feel about the program afterwards.
And I get the fans think it affects them, every kid. Adam Gorney just dropped, our national guy for rivals.com/on3.com, just dropped an update with some of the commitments. Jordan Edmonds, this loss doesn't affect my commitment or how I feel about the team or the staff. which I think is going to be the most. I've never actually heard anybody go, yeah, I'm out. You know what I mean? I've never heard anybody go, they lost the game, I'm out. But Jet Tamal, I'm not worried at all. Doesn't affect my commitment and any of the other commitments. They'll be able to flip it
I mean,
around.
how many teams have lost games, or they've gone 3-9, or they've gone 5-7, and they feel really confident that they can still sign a great recruiting class.
Well,
Alabama.
that's part of the sales pitch, right?
Yeah,
Come
I mean,
in and
I
start.
just don't understand. Everybody thinks that kids are just going to bail quickly, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, kids are still completely locked in. Now, if you want to run a bunch of coaches out of town, uh, things start to potentially shift, and the kids start wanting to take other visits elsewhere. Players on the team, they want to look elsewhere. You just have to kind of be patient and see where things go over the next 3 months, whether it's on the field, off the field, with recruiting. But I mean, you saw what happened over the course of the last
Yeah.
8 months. These guys bought into the program. They wanted to stay here. They believed in this coaching staff. Now, do they still believe in them moving forward? That's going to be really important.
All right. Speaking of Jet Tamala, let's stick to recruiting. Jet Tamala, Andrew, was 19 to 25, 76% completion, 285 yards, 5 TDs against the number 2 team in the state of Nevada. Only Bishop Gorman, pretty damn good in the state of Nevada. Obviously, a big game for him. He said he's still locked in. But before we get out of here, I want to talk about our guy, Xavier Kroll. We waited. Can he deliver? A lot of hype. Suspended 1 game by the AHSAA. Andrew Bone, did he deliver in his first game out?
Yeah, I mean, I think he averaged over 20 yards, 23 or 24 yards per rush. I mean, he only had 11 carries, but I think it was, what was it, 242?
Yep, 242, 11 carries, 2 touchdowns.
And didn't even, man, I talked to his coach. I talked to his coach. I talked to his head coach, Coach Flournoy. He told me, he said, we didn't even play him much in the second half. Didn't need him. I mean, they blew out
11 carries. That was it. He got 11 carries.
Yeah. So, I think that he was excited to get back out there. They were really upset about the suspension the previous week. They didn't agree with it. They didn't think he did anything wrong. It was a tough situation, but he's back full go. So you certainly expect Jackson to have another outstanding season in Class 4A.
Yeah, he'll be up for our BOL Commitment Performance of the Week. Last week's winner was Jordan Edmonds. Really good game on both sides of the ball. Jordan continues to shine. I'm not sure. I would not throw the ball to Jordan Edmonds. We hope they do so we can get the highlights or the chance at the highlights. But all that, we got more coming up. We got more stuff on the BamaOnLine Roundtable, updates, the visitors list. It's Tuesday. That list is not solidified. There'll be that won't come. There'll be players that will come. They'll be working that this week. And we expect Alabama to roll back in and look much better at home on a Saturday night. Andrew Bone, get us out of here, please.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for watching the show today. As Tim said, we'll have a lot of stuff on BamaOnline.com, so come check us out if you want to talk to us directly. We're on the message board every single day, so you can have a conversation with us, whether it's about football, movies, anything. We're going to talk to you, just about anything you want to talk about. So come check us out at BamaOnline.com, and hopefully we'll have a good week.
All right, see you guys, and we'll see you next week. Roll Tide. Thank you for watching.